Now a great sign appeared in heaven, a woman clothed with the sun, with the moon under her feet, and on her head a garland of 12 stars. Then, being with child, she cried out in labor and in pain to give birth. And another sign appeared in heaven. Behold, a great fiery red dragon. And the dragon stood before the woman who was ready to give birth, to devour her child as soon as it was born.
A woman, a child, and a dragon. At first glance, this might sound like the ingredients for a frightening fairy tale. In fact, the troubling scenes that you just witnessed are part of a true and powerful prophecy given to the Apostle John nearly 2,000 years ago. What does this prophecy found in Revelation 12 tell us? Does it point to some event that happened thousands of years ago? Or does it describe things that are going to take place in the near future? And who do the woman, the dragon, and the child represent? Join us now as we journey deep into a world that few have ever seen, but all are a part of. Revelation, the bride, the beast, and Babylon. In the last book of the Bible, Revelation, the Apostle John was shown a vision of a great struggle between good and evil, a prophecy of a battle that has been raging behind the scenes since the dawn of time. The secrets behind this prophecy have been shrouded in mystery for centuries, until now. From the kingdoms and the rulers that have fallen around the world, to the men and women that stood up to fight for what they believed in, this is the story of Christianity, the search for truth, and the foundation for the faith of billions.
Now a great sign appeared in heaven, a woman clothed with the sun, with the moon under her feet, and on her head a garland of 12 stars. Then, being with child, she cried out in labor and in pain to give birth. And the dragon stood before the woman who was ready to give birth, to devour her child as soon as it was born.
Many Bible scholars and historians have studied this prophecy over the years and agree that the prophecy of Revelation 12 points to an event known as the Massacre of the Innocents, which occurred in first century Judea.
In the decades leading up to the birth of Christ, the Roman Empire had conquered the whole Mediterranean world, including Judea. And at various points in that history, they had different people ruling over it. 20 years before Jesus was born, you have King Herod, a client king for Rome. We have documents about him outside the Bible that tell us that he was very cruel. He was capable of killing his own sons. He was ruthless, and you wouldn't want to get on his bad side.
Herod was very anxious when a small delegation of wise men from the east came to Jerusalem, announcing their search for the newborn King of the Jews.
Why would Herod be upset about that? Because that was Herod's title, as bestowed upon him by the Roman Empire, King of the Jews.
And he asks his astrologers, how long is it possible this child could have been born ago? And they determine it's probably been maybe 2 years at most since this child was born, maybe less.
He finds out from the Pharisees and the Sadducees exactly where this child is to be born. And he finds out it's Bethlehem. And he worried about losing his throne. And so he has such anger against this child, he sends in the soldiers to try and kill Jesus.
Bible tells us this barbaric act was inspired by more than just the tyrannical jealousy of an old king. Many Bible scholars believe that it's part of a much bigger struggle that has spanned the ages and is still happening today. To uncover the secrets of this prophecy, we're going to first need to identify the main characters: the woman, the child, and the dragon.
He says, "Then I saw another sign, a woman clothed with the sun, with the moon under her feet, and on her head a crown of 12 stars."
Let's take a closer look at the woman. We know that she's a symbol of someone or something. Does the Bible tell us what this woman represents?
Husbands, love your wives, just as Christ loved the church and gave himself for her.
We gather from this that the church is the bride of Christ. Not only is she the bride of Christ, but in a certain sense, since no man hates his own flesh, the church is Jesus' body.
Very clearly, a woman in Scripture represents the church. You have a woman as representative of God's people. We see this in the Old Testament, we see it in the New Testament. Jesus comes from the people of Israel, and then the church grows up as something that Jesus develops.
Most importantly, this woman is about to give birth to a special male child. Who is the child?
We have a couple of indications. One, he rules with a rod of iron over the nations. That's a reference to the Old Testament, where clearly God is the one ruling over the nations with a rod of iron. And then he says he's caught up into heaven. And who is caught up into heaven?
Jesus Christ, right? He's going to be King of Kings and Lord of Lords.
So these two indications pretty definitively tell us that this is Jesus.
Now let's consider the arch-villain in this important prophecy, the dragon.
And another sign appeared in heaven. Behold, a great fiery red dragon.
You know, I wish I could just give you a fanciful theory here, but the Bible tells us who the dragon is. The dragon is the devil.
Both in the Old Testament and the New Testament, who tries to destroy it. That is Satan, you know, the angel, the devil. And so he attacks as soon as Christ comes upon the face of the earth. The attack is there.
So the great dragon was cast out, that serpent of old, called the devil and Satan, who deceives the whole world. He was cast to the earth, and his angels were cast out with him.
What we see here in the first part of Revelation 12 is a symbolic portrayal of the age-old conflict between Christ and Satan. All through the life and ministry of Christ, Satan tried to disrupt Jesus' plans to provide salvation for humanity.
But he was wounded for our transgressions. He was bruised for our iniquities. The chastisement for our peace was upon him, and by his stripes we are healed.
At various points, they kicked him out of synagogues and wanted to push him off a cliff.
They tried to silence him. They tortured him to death publicly.
But Satan's scheme to derail the plan of salvation was utterly shattered when Jesus rose from the dead.
And her child was caught up to God and his throne.
With the Son of God now physically beyond his reach, the devil directed all of his fury at the followers of Jesus, the new Christians. He did much of this through the cruel power of imperial Rome.
Now when the dragon saw that he had been cast to the earth, he persecuted the woman who gave birth to the male child.
Christianity was a struggling, small, persecuted minority that didn't have official status in the Roman Empire, and there were a series of persecutions, some of which were quite severe.
One of the roles of religion in the Roman Empire was to ensure the well-being of the state. The idea was if the gods were worshipped properly, then they would favor the empire, and if they were worshipped improperly, then they would, bad things would happen to the empire as a result of divine wrath.
They do not want to sacrifice to the gods, and the gods at that point include the emperor.
So it's easy to consider these people religious scapegoats. Basically, if something's going wrong, Probably it's because there are Christians around who are refusing to give the gods their proper due.
Well, of course you have to punish them. And punishment meant, most of the time death.
What people thought was that Christians gathered together also seemed to make love with their brothers and sisters.
Because there were rumors about them that they commit incest. Well, see, because the Christians used to call themselves brother and sister. And they used to eat the flesh of Christ.
People heard, apparently, that Christians were eating children.
So when pagans heard about this, they thought the worst, right? They assumed the worst.
Christians are progressively stripped of their civil offices, their military offices. Their books are confiscated, their churches are destroyed, they're forbidden to meet, and so on, all because there's an anxiety that this is really undermining the welfare of the empire.
As the early church suffered under this withering persecution of Rome, their lives became a powerful testimony for truth. While the pagans lived in constant superstitious fear, these Christians faced torture and death with a supernatural peace.
Basically, what Nero did was he fed them to the lions. He had them tied to pillars. He put pitch on them, and then he set them on fire as human torches so they could have the festivities continue on into the night.
Being stretched, pulled into two, being killed by gladiators.
Just about every creative way that you can dispose of Christians.
When facing the painful end of their lives, they often sang and rejoiced. As thousands of Christians paid the ultimate price for their faith, their dying prayers and blood essentially became seed for the new church.
People are so enthralled by how these Christians are dying that immediately, the reaction is, sign me up.
And so the Christians spread like wildfire. The more you killed them, the more they stood for their faith.
Now, it is true, and I think it has to be emphasized, that the early church spreads despite the very concerted attempts at repression of extremely autocratic and powerful emperors who set themselves very firmly against the Christians, and yet the early church survives.
Tertullian argues whenever something goes wrong, whenever there's a famine or whenever there's an illness, a pestilence that sweeps through, everybody says, "The Christians to the lion." And then he says snidely, as if so many could be fed to so few. And his point is that you can't destroy us all.
During this time of exponential growth, Christians all across the Roman Empire quite literally went underground. This labyrinth of tunnels and chambers beneath the Roman cities became known as the catacombs.
Now, the catacombs are important to understand. First, many people imagine that there are caves naturally under Rome, and the Christians simply went into them. The catacombs, almost without exception, are not natural caves. They were excavated by the Christians.
And so the Christians made a whole labyrinth underground.
Sometimes services would be held there, in the very tombs of the martyrs.
The second point is the very act of burying your dead is hugely significant. Christians believe in a resurrection of the body. Now, of course, that belief has shifted and changed over the centuries, but from all we understand, early Christians believed that they would be resurrected in that actual bodily form, and therefore they chose to bury their dead, not to cremate them. Therefore, if you are seen to be burying your dead, especially at times when there are intense waves of persecution, you're more or less saying to the police, "Come and investigate me, I may well be a Christian."
In AD 306, a new Roman emperor came into power, and things began to rapidly change. Constantine the Great was a capable military leader and a shrewd politician.
So Constantine had to fight a series of civil wars in order to achieve his political aim of becoming emperor. And that's his own personal and political aim. It's got nothing to do with Christianity. He goes down from Gaul, modern-day France, where his power base was, to confront his rival Maxentius in Italy.
Constantine moves down from the north. And you think of Italy, there's this long stretch. And he wins one battle after another.
As he was marching with his army, he had a dream one night where God came to him and told him, you will become a Christian and put this sign on your shield, and you will conquer. Shortly after that, he actually had a vision, which history tells us was seen by his army as well as by Constantine himself.
He looked up to the sun, and he saw a cross of light above it, and the Greek words "en tutu nikeia," by this conquer.
The story that he had had this dream does appear at a relatively early stage. It's described by Eusebius. There are different sources, there are different versions, but it does seem that Constantine does say, I've had this divine encounter, and an angel has told me that in the sign of the cross I will conquer.
Constantine commanded his troops to adorn their shields with the Christian symbol.
His opponent then moves out of the city to face the oncoming Constantine with his army, which has now been trained quite a bit because they've already won several victories on the way down, from the north, from Milan down. His opponent moves across the river at the Million Bridge, has Constantine and his army in front of him, the river and the city behind him. Not a great situation to be in. So if you do not beat the oncoming army, you have nowhere to retreat. So he loses.
So for Constantine, who is certainly not yet a Christian, this is a powerful thing because he himself believes the Christian God has given me victory. The Christian God is more powerful than these other deities.
I mean, it is clear that Constantine made the symbol of Christianity part of the imperial standards and that he fought under that symbol and he won. And so being a good Roman emperor, he would then think, yeah, I got the sign. I'm on the right path.
So if you're a pagan or just somebody who's confused about religion, you've had here this clash of deities. And who's emerged on top? The Christian God. You can draw your own conclusions.
Gradually, the national sentiment against Christianity began reversing. During Constantine's reign, Christians went from being a persecuted sect to openly holding positions of influence in the courts and palaces of kings and governors.
So a large part of the elites used to running the show automatically then become also the local bishops, etc. You know, become Christian. It wasn't such a big leap because most of them anyway believed in one supreme divine being which had different representations.
If you want to advance in the army or in the imperial civil service, there's every incentive to become a Christian because all the people at the top are Christians. So, you know, if you want to advance in the hierarchy, whether it's military, civil service, or just at court, people become Christians.
It becomes very attractive because Constantine's Edict of Toleration makes it so.
Constantine can rightfully claim the title of great, for he turned the history of the world into a new course and made Christianity, which until then had suffered bloody persecution, the religion of the state.
And so, as people from around the Roman Empire entered the Christian church, they brought with them many of their former pagan beliefs and practices.
Now that Christianity has been given the status as a full legal religion, then it becomes attractive subsequently in the next generations for a broad number of members of this upper elite. Now the percentage of Christians in this top 10, 15, 25% increases, and it increases dramatically in the top 1-2%. That's the real change. That is when Christianity really becomes the Christianity that it is today. Because now the people who've been running the show, they are now Christian.
Over time, church leaders began to embrace the regal robes and flamboyant ceremony that was part of the pagan religions. And in place of the simple commands of God, they began to teach superstitions and man-made traditions. Now, instead of the Christian church converting the heathen world, the pagans were converting the church.
There's a train coming out of the first century represented by the documents we have in the New Testament that demonstrate kind of the shape of the church there, going into this long dark tunnel of the 2nd through 4th centuries. And then coming out in the 4th century of this long dark tunnel, and The train of the church that comes out is so different than the train of the church that goes in. You say, what happened?
In AD 391, by the order of Emperor Theodosius I, Christianity became the official state religion of Rome. Worship at pagan temples was outlawed, and all other religious practices ceased.
You're trying to Christianize an empire. You're trying to Christianize a pagan culture. The old basilicas were basically pagan temples. Put a cross over it. Put in paintings of biblical scenes, biblical heroes and saints and martyrs.
Christians are very purposeful and intentional about taking over pagan temples. And there's a notable church leader who actually writes this in a treatise that survives. He writes a rebuttal of pagan attacks on Christianity. And part of his evidence is he says, your very own places of worship are now Christian places of worship. We have taken them over, we have cleansed out the idolatry, we have sanctified them, and we have made them places where the one true God is worshipped. What clearer evidence could you wish that your whole system of belief is false? Where are your gods if they're allowing this to happen? So Christians actually deliberately at times and purposefully, as a strategy, take pagan not only places but rituals or ideas, and as they think, subvert them to advance the cause of, spreading Christianity. What we don't know is the extent to which they think this through and say, well, at what point is it legitimate to do this, and at what point do we perhaps begin to be taking on other ideas?
The speed with which the early church tobogganed into apostasy will take your breath away.
Have you ever wished that you could better understand the prophetic symbols and themes found in the book of Revelation? Well, I have good news. You can. The answers are in Amazing Facts' latest high-definition Bible documentary called Revelation, The Bride, the Beast, and Babylon. This stunning 90-minute film is a visual feast that explores and explains in depth the core prophecies found in the apocalyptic book of Revelation. To get your free copy, text your name, address, and requested free offer details to 0458-222-444 or visit amazingfacts.com.au. And you can email us at freegifts@amazingfacts.com.au. Thank you so much for watching Amazing Facts Presents today. And remember, God's message is our mission.
Are you wondering what lies ahead in human history, or what recent world events are harbingers of the end? Are you ready for the coming crisis? Landmarks of Prophecy offers clear answers to your most pressing questions. Presented by Pastor Doug Batchelor, Landmarks of Prophecy is a contemporary video Bible study adventure designed for today's audiences, presenting the landmark themes of the Bible in a bright and compelling way, helping you understand the Bible better and giving you knowledge to face the future with confidence. Landmarks of Prophecy contains over 30 hours of exciting video presentations on 6 DVDs, plus bonus question and answer sessions, giving you keen insight into what lies next in human history. If you'd like practical tools to help you thrive and survive in the here and now, get Landmarks of Prophecy. Start your epic Bible study adventure with Landmarks of Prophecy today by calling 07-5577-1041 or by visiting amazingfacts.com.au.
Amazing Facts has impacted my life.
I just praise God for Amazing Facts.
Amazing Facts actually did have an impact in my life.
This whole process, getting to where I am today.
Amazing Facts.
I felt good about that. I didn't feel condemned. I felt
I began reading the Bible. I got baptized into Seventh-day.
I realized that there had to be more to life.
God is really doing this.
The life that He's given.
This message was so powerful.
Christ wherever He goes.
Amazing Facts. More than 45 years of proclaiming God's message around the world.
And then the logo pops across, Amazing Facts Presents. I've listened to a lot of different ministers, but this was the first time that he's actually saying something where I had to grab my Bible and actually pick it up. And I've never heard this before. Let me look through and find this. And I just couldn't get enough.
And so I started doing Bible studies. Every single one of these guys started being changed, including myself.
My question was, why did that happen to me, God? The Lord was able to reach out and I actually saw him as a father.
I lost everything, and that was when I realized that it was God missing in my life.
I went to a prophecy seminar, which knocked me out. This message was so powerful and so irrefutable. I just went, this is real. This is amazing.